Hello and welcome to the F1 Downcast. With my co host Tyler, I am Caolán, and we're back here to discuss the chaotic Australian GP and look forward to this weekend's Chinese GP. How are we doing today, Tyler?
We're doing pretty good. Not as tired as I have been. So I guess that's good. I'm also kind of running off of a high of an exciting weekend.
Well, that tiredness will change for that nice 3 a.m. start we have for China.
I mean, I was pretty brutal the whole weekend having to stay up till, 1 or midnight to just watch the race and not going to bed till 3:30 or something. So, yeah, we'll see.
So let's get straight into this one. We had a pretty crazy Australian GP to talk about. Rookies struggled. I think that is one of the main themes of the weekend is that a wet race on a street track was not good for our huge crop of rookie drivers, and they really struggled outside of Kimi Antonelli. Pretty much everyone had issues.
Yeah. Even some veteran drivers.
Yeah, Alonso wrecking kind of caught me off guard. He's usually so good in the rain that, and Australia is not exactly a new track to him. So that
Can
one kind of caught me off guard.
can you imagine the look on Lawrence Stroll's face when he realized it wasn't Lance that crashed out?
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure he thought the same thing that everyone thought when they saw an Aston Martin against the wall, which is, oh no, Lance. Oh, habit, force of habit.
Honestly, the fact that the commentators didn't accidentally assume it was Lance is kind of surprising because that
I think
happens.
I think it helped that it was an onboard. If it wouldn't
Mm,
have been an onboard, I think they would have. But you can see the helmet pretty good from the onboard, and Alonso's helmet stands out really well, especially compared to Lance, because Lance just has a Aston Martin colored helmet.
yeah, yeah.
So before we get into our predictions, I want to have a small little conversation, and we didn't even talk about this beforehand because I wanted to get your raw thoughts on
Okay.
it. I don't know if I want to say I was angry about it, but I was a little confused. And so I watched the race on F1 TV, and I usually watch F1 TV commentary, and then I go back and I watch the race with Crofty's commentary and the international broadcast. And they brought up something on the international broadcast that I had a problem with as well, and it was during the Alonso crash having the safety car out instead of a red flag with all the vehicles on track. I don't like that. I did not like that situation. Uh, you had drivers with slick tires on in wet conditions, and you had a lot of people out on the track, including vehicles. And is
And
that's just something that I don't think should be happening.
we saw Hajar crash out on the formation lap before the race even started on inners.
Yeah, and now
It
you had a bunch of guys on different tires, some guys on slicks. I just don't necessarily like the idea of in wet conditions on a street track having recovery vehicles on track without a red flag. I think in that situation with how long it was going to take to get, especially Alonso off the track, I didn't like having the recovery vehicles out there. And
yeah.
there was even a weird situation where Norris was following the pace car, and the pace car cut a corner to get out of the way of the tractor, but the F1 cars didn't want to cut that corner because there was a risk of picking up debris. So they took the regular corner, and that could have went differently.
It could have went very, very badly.
And I only bring it up because I was watching the international broadcast today, and Crofty was a little bit some way about it, and
And
I under I
in agreement
understand
with you.
why. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
He was a little miffed about it, and I can understand why, and I can understand.
I mean, I'm with you and Crafty on this. I didn't watch the international broadcast. It is something that crossed my mind. I think on the I just watched like the standard F1 TV broadcast. It they didn't show a whole lot of that like recovery process, at least as far as I was able to see. Um, but it I don't know what would be going through the FIA's mind when it comes to yellow flagging, or I guess yellow flagging with a safety car, or red flagging and stopping the race. Um, I would have definitely erred on the side of just red flagging it. This was a bunch of debris, very slick conditions. We saw somebody crash out on a formation lap with proper tires. At that point, people were running slicks on a if you go off the race line on a slick, that's bad. That's not good. Um, and so I would love to consider this an FIA blunder. But I would also love to know why they did that.
My devil's advocate voice says that it's good to have the cars on track to make sure there's not a buildup of water, because the cars, even going under safety car, do clear a lot of water. And they were expecting
I think
more rain,
class
not,
3 rain.
but I'd still rather have a red flag and err on the side of caution. And it's a fluid situation and chaotic, but I feel like I don't like how many close calls we've had with vehicles on the track. I remember when Gasly was in his, I believe, last season with AlphaTauri, and Max won the title in Japan in the rainstorm. How Gasly almost hit the tractor because it was on the track and the drivers weren't warned that it was on the track, and that was a big flashpoint. And I feel like we've had a couple of these things. The recovery vehicle in 2021 in Monza when Daniel Ricciardo, or not Daniel Ricciardo, I think Norris. Was it Norris that almost hit it?
I think so. I think so. It was so long ago, I couldn't for
Yeah,
sure tell you.
but we've had a couple of these issues with tractors now on the track, and these rules were put into place because of Jules Bianchi being killed in a collision with the tractor in the rain, and I was a little bit miffed about that, and not going to get on much of a rant about it, but I did want to see your opinion on it
Yeah,
before we actually discuss the results.
yeah. I think it could have been handled significantly better. I mean, you're putting innocent, track workers in danger. You're putting the drivers in danger. You're putting points and the crew's work on any team that might potentially be involved in an incident like that. On the line. These days, it's not worth the risk. Those cars are going fast. Even on a yellow flag, they're still going at a decent pace. And when it's wet, there is no grip, especially on slicks. Like, I think that is the defining factor. If everybody was running inters or full wets, I think the argument could be maybe a tiny, tiny bit different. But the fact that a majority of the field was on slicks, that should not have been the case at all. That should have just been
Yeah,
red flagged.
we're in agreement on that. Yeah, definitely in agreement. So now let's get into talking about first our predictions and how those panned out, which mine went wonderful.
Same.
I did hit on two, so I have at least that. I hit on my lock of the week, which was George beating Kimmy, but woo, that was a lot closer than I expected. That was, and I'm sure we'll get back to that with some of yours because you were a lot higher on Kimmy than I was coming into this race. And then I had Lando and Max first and second. The rest of the top five was horrible, but I got my one and two right.
I don't. Looking back, I didn't get a single thing right. Like, not a single thing. So
At least I feel better about that. I at least got something.
yeah, you got your 1-2 right. So
My misses, Mercedes proved me very wrong. Their qualifying pace in very warm conditions on Saturday proved that they fixed a lot of issues with their car. George was incredible in qualifying. Kimmy was incredible during the race. Mercedes are still not a top car, but they're a lot closer than I thought they would be at this point.
yeah,
And conversely, Ferrari is what I thought Mercedes would be. Ferrari looks like a dumpster fire. The clown meme on the pit wall needs to be back again. Lewis yelling at his engineer to, hey, I got it. I got it. I got it. I got it. Okay, please leave me alone.
or the Charles Leclerc message where he's like, "There's water in the cockpit. There's something leaking," and then he's just like, "It's water."
It's like, I love his add that to the words of wisdom.
Yeah,
Leclerc just now has a bank of dumb things the Ferrari pit wall has said to him.
I had a friend text me after that. He was at the bar that my girlfriend works at watching it, and they didn't have the audio on for it. And he's like, I can't tell if Charles Leclerc was angry or what. And I was like, it was more of a snarky content or like comment than anything else.
It was another year at Ferrari comment.
Exactly.
Everyone wants to go to Ferrari. Everyone wants to wear those red overalls. Everyone wants to get in the car, and then they have to deal with the people who work there.
Yeah, and I think for Lewis with the engineer, talking to him, they're learning that balance. It's the first GP of the season. It's not something that can be easily ironed out preseason because practice or testing is a vastly different thing than actually being in the middle of a race. So I'm sure that'll get ironed out over the season, hopefully sooner rather than later. But even the team principal for Ferrari, Vasseur, was saying that they're gonna fix that. I'm not sure how you can, because the engineer is there to assist said driver, but we'll see.
I just really enjoyed the escalation from Lewis being incredibly calm and friendly to being like, okay, please shut the fuck up.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
okay, I'm learning the car, but I can't learn the car if you don't quit talking.
Well, it's interesting because at the first time, and during the F1 TV broadcast, not the international broadcast, uh, at least I don't know about the international broadcast. They commented on Lewis being so polite to his
Yeah.
engineer. So
And then a half an hour later, he's like, okay, I'm learning the car.
yeah.
Give me a minute, brah.
And that was not a weekend to learn the car. Not at all.
Yeah, I'm sure he felt like a rookie at times in that situation where it's like, oh crap, what are all these modes that you only use in these certain situations and I have to know them already? Crap.
Yeah. So what are our general thoughts on this? Because I know we have some listed off, and there's a couple that I wanted to say.
So, my first is, oh man, that McLaren is fast. I knew the McLaren would be the fastest car. I don't know what their weakness is. Their weakness may be the FIA, though. I don't know if you have seen the technical directive that just came down. But they were asked to stop their little mini DRS they had been doing last year.
Yeah.
They did not. McLaren and other teams, the names of the other teams weren't mentioned, but I'm going to say they were a silver car. We're using the mini DRS again, and the FIA was not happy. Effective immediately, there is a new test being imposed in China.
Ooh.
On the rear wings and the gaps that are allowed. They basically gave teams a chance to police themselves, and they didn't, and now the FIA is really bad about it.
I mean,
so now they're being very strict about their rear wing test.
DRS goes away next season. Like, why? DRS goes away next season. Why police it so hard?
Because what they're doing isn't legal. What McLaren was able to do last year is... So part of it, and I'm sure a lot of this is coming from the Red Bull side of things, where Red Bull had a very creative thing that wasn't technically illegal, but it went into some gray area with their rear wing. It got clamped down on. And then McLaren did something that is illegal. And the FIA was like, all right, don't make us do a directive on this. Just fix it. And they had an agreement too. And not only has McLaren not done that, but some other teams have adopted what McLaren does. And basically, the way that it is there is a gap in the wing that is not supposed to exist that happens every lap. So even when they're not using DRS, they're still getting some of... Yes. And then when they use DRS, the extra flex makes it even bigger. And the FIA was not happy that they did not comply with what they said they would. So now they had to put it in the rule books, and now they're policing it extremely heavily.
Wouldn't you imagine they would police this shit during testing and not the first GP of the year?
Testing? Well, technically testing, you don't have to worry about it. Going back a couple years when Mercedes had the DAS system that they showed in testing, and the FIA was like, all right, well, this isn't technically fully against the rules, but you're not doing that. So we're going to write it in the rules that you can't do it. Don't make us do it sooner. Just don't use it in races. And that's kind of how this DRS situation was supposed to be with how the rear wing was designed. The teams that didn't abide by it weren't listed in the FIA statement. It was more than one team. I know two of the teams for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if Ferrari is a third included in that, but I know Mercedes and McLaren are.
Yeah. I have a rant brewing, and I don't know if we have time for it today, but I will just leave it at this. The FIA loves to throw their dick out on shit that doesn't matter, like cursing, but is so behind the course on things like this.
In fairness to the FIA, and I will defend them on this, it is really hard to police things like this because you have to invent the test for it. You have to create a test for it. It has to be something that you can do that is a feasible option to test, something that you can bring with you, something that doesn't take 3 hours of tearing down a car to test. That's why the flexi wing thing became such a big deal. Is
Well, they didn't test to
the,
find out the teams that were named or the teams that weren't named. They didn't test. They just
well,
noticed.
they didn't test at all. It was so everything is passing the tests that currently exist. But then
Ah,
video evidence is showing that things are happening that aren't supposed to be happening. So the test has to change, but it can be hard to change some of those tests because you're talking about pressure load tests, and it has to be something that can travel. It has to be something that you don't have to tear apart an entire car for. It has to be something that you don't risk breaking one of the wings testing. So there's a lot that does go into creating the test of policing. And basically, what the FIA did was, and I mean, they warned teams they were going to do this, and the teams just chose to do what they did. They were going to go into the first race of the year and look at video evidence and see how much these rear wings were moving. And the answer ended up being way more than they were told by teams they were, and that a lot of the teams lied straight to their face about it.
which
So,
how are you gonna do that and not expect to get caught if you lied? If you know you willingly lied about it, how are you expecting to not get caught?
that's the game of F1.
What else are your general thoughts?
Um, we still have no idea about any of the rookies,
Yeah,
other than probably Kimmy.
yeah,
We'll get into it more when we talk about predictions, but there were a couple things in that race that I really want to see what happens in China.
yeah.
Like, are racing bulls actually really that fast? Because Hadger and Sonoda were flying all weekend.
Yeah, and Yuki
It wasn't
got
just a
P6.
Yeah, it wasn't just a lucky qualifying performance that got them both in good positions. And honestly, Hadger some really hard luck not to make it out of Q2 into Q3. Race aside and what happened in the rain aside, Hadger was incredibly fast and consistent, especially given that he missed time this weekend. Which a lot of rookies miss time because of technical issues with cars. Lawson missed an entire practice session with an engine issue. Behrman basically didn't have an F1 weekend until the race.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean honestly, all of the rookies I expected to crash did crash, except for Batman.
Well, that's because he got all his crashing out of the way every other session.
Yeah, but going every other session with a crash to then not crash in the Grand Prix in the slickest conditions where you had Alonso crashing, you had Sainz crashing. Granted, Sainz was in a brand new car, but still, he's a veteran in F1 at this point.
Well, the difference is, though, Behrman wasn't actually racing at that point.
That's
Behrman
fair.
was at the back of the field on a pit lane start, and
Just
the only
gathering information.
only position he made was on his own teammate as they were running last and laster.
Yeah, and I mean, he did finish technically in the results. He finished last if you exclude the DNFs. But it was just a race to gather information. But he still didn't crash. So, like, I'm going to give him a pat on the back for that. Because he didn't crash in the slickest of conditions on a street course with painted lines that are not FIA painted, whereas 5 other cars in the field did. And most of those were rookies, but still.
All right, maybe he gets a golf clap. That's about it. Yeah, that's the extent of the applause that pretty much the entire rookie class gets for Australia.
Except for Kimi Antonelli.
Which apparently I'm wrong about, and he's the next coming of Max Verstappen, because wow, was that kid fast.
Yeah, P4 on your debut for Mercedes after being reinstated, because he was P5 at the end of the race because he had a 5-second penalty.
Yeah,
Turns out it got reinstated.
Yeah. Yeah. Had an
And
unsafe release penalty, and then Mercedes brought a different camera view or something like that to the FIA afterwards and got it overturned.
yeah,
So
that was impressive, because to have both Mercedes finish P3, P4 was not in my cards, especially for Kimi. Like I have spoken highly of Kimi, but we've also spoken very much about how big the shoes that he's trying to fill are. And so I imagined he would finish top 10, but definitely not P4. And he did. And that was a really, really impressive race for your first GP in Mercedes.
especially coming from so far back in the field to do it like that, I was very impressed with him. And I was very impressed with Alex Albon.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm curious as to how much Sainz helping run strategy for Albon helped with that, considering Sainz crashed out and then immediately went to the pit wall to help with strategy for Albon and pitting at the right time.
So we'll talk about that in a second. And I know you had a lot of opinions on that. But
yeah,
the one thing I want to give Albon credit for is he was fast from the first flag in practice. So while he did get some help from Sainz, I don't want to take away from the fact that he was on a great pace from the word go.
yeah.
I've been very critical of Albon and wondering if he can actually be a team, not really leader, because I think Sainz is that team leader, but a how he can deal against a very competitive teammate, because he's had a bunch of guys who, in some cases, shouldn't even be in F1 as teammates. And he has wiped the floor with them and sent them out of F1. And I wasn't sure how he would deal with a competitive teammate, because the only time we saw him with one was Colapinto, and he struggled at first until Colapinto struggled to keep it on the track, over pushing. But until that, Albon struggled with his pace a little bit. And so I was very worried knowing how good Sainz is. And I mean, Sainz still outperformed him until the mechanical issue that created the wreck, but not by as much as I thought he would. And Albon was still incredible.
It makes me curious if Williams is running a dedicated number one driver.
Whether they're saying it or not, I think they are.
I feel like it's very, I don't know. Part of me feels like it's very much the McLaren thing, which I have words on that because, god damn, those stupid fucking papaya rules. I think depending on the situation, there is a number one driver. I think it can ebb and flow depending on how the race is going for the particular driver.
Well, and I think when you're in a mid-pack team, that conversation doesn't matter as much, because your goal is the team needs to get better. So who's
Yeah.
one and who's two really doesn't matter as much.
Yeah.
The 1 and 2 driver matters when you're fighting for a championship, which they're not. So I don't think that'll become too much of an issue.
Yeah. And obviously we can see how much McLaren fails with the whole 1-2 driver thing. Like the biggest thing that irked me in that race.
I am actually going to defend McLaren in this, because I think people are taking it out of context what happened. And it's part of the fault of the way that team radios are delayed. because so if you go back and actually listen to the team radios, like rewatch and listen to team radios, what actually happened was they were telling Oscar not to fight Lando while they were going through the Haas's. They wanted to get through the lap cars and then they were good to fight. The broadcast, because of how late they were with those messages, made it seem like they were telling them not to fight.
And
They
then
were
and then
actually
getting the message after that after Piastri was 2 seconds behind Lando.
Yeah, when in reality it was just telling Piastri wait till after the lap cars.
But that's still like I get that part, but like Piastri
Well,
was faster.
but you also have to consider in the rain there's one racing line.
True.
If
That is
you
true.
if you are trying to pass your teammate while dealing with lap cars, then you are dealing with a situation where one or both of you is going off the racing line and could possibly take the situation completely to a disaster.
As a quick sidebar to the one racing line thing, at the end of the race when Piastri overtook Hamlin on the outside or on the inside, well, it was like outside and inside. Wild. Absolutely wild. That's my comment on that.
There were some pretty good overtakes in that race when the overtakes weren't somebody running into a wall.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, with that context, it does help me a bit not be so irritated with the whole papaya rules thing because you are right. The broadcast shows the radio late, but it was still frustrating in that moment to just be like, you guys still haven't figured it out yet. And then
And
and like to
yeah,
say the way they showed it to say that okay, you guys can fight, but now Piastri's over 2 seconds behind Lando. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? There is no fight.
well, and really how he got behind was because he started pushing again and then lost it a little bit,
Yeah, he got some grass.
which then almost kind of defends what they did. Like, see, if you'd have did this around a lap car, you could both be out right now.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
in
yeah,
the moment, I was in the same thing, and I think I even text you something about it, like
yeah.
Zach Brown. Oh, we're gonna let him race. 30 seconds later, hold position.
Yep, yep, you did. And in that moment
But
I was pissed too. I was like,
it
really?
it after going back and looking at the onboard footage, it's a little bit different. Though I have one criticism of the new F1 TV. They basically took a lot of things that the multi-viewer app was doing, um, where you can bring up many streams at one time. But
Which didn't work for me.
what you can do on multi-viewer that you can't do on F1 TV is have multiple audios playing at the same time. So the way I would run things with multi-viewers, I would have the race broadcast and I would have Max's onboard audio so that I could hear both. And if I wanted to do that, I had to have like the my F1 TV up on my computer, and then I took out my phone and brought up Max's onboard so I could hear his onboard audio. And that was kind of annoying because I like being able to hear the team radio because there's so much that they don't show on the broadcast,
Yeah.
and so, some of it was absolutely hilarious. There was a clip that I believe I've sent you under the Alonso safety car when they're talking about pitting for tires, and Max was very adamant, like, this is inners. We just need to go get another set of inners. And then GP is telling him, well, everybody else is getting slicks. And
Max is like, well, fuck me.
Max's response was literally, oh, fucking hell. Okay.
Fuck it.
All right. I guess we're doing this. Like
Yeah.
Max could not believe that everybody was on slicks, and he was like, "Oh, all right. Well, I'm not going to be the only one out here on this." And they
Yeah.
kind of got a little bit lucky. Um, when he stayed out an extra 2 laps, it ended up not costing them any position, and they said he would be in the same position no matter what, but I argue that a little bit because if he would have pit with Norris when Norris and Piastri both went off, I think it might have been a closer thing because
Yeah.
I think he might have actually, based on where their pit stalls are located, there was a chance that if Red Bull could get a really good stop in, he might have a chance of getting out in front of Norris because Norris had lost so much time when he was coming into the pits.
Yeah, that's true. I would agree with that.
But I liked the gamble because if Piastri wouldn't have been able to get the car going, which for a minute it didn't look like he would have, then the safety car comes out. You're down to limited speed. That 20-some second pit stop turns to a 15-second pit stop, and Max is probably in the lead after that pit stop.
Yeah.
So I
Which
like his team leaving him out there when it looked like there was going to be a safety car or at least a virtual safety car. But Piastri kind of pulled a bit of a miracle getting out of the grass there.
which was in my uh, hits for the week or for the race. Piastri getting stuck in the grass, reversing his way out, and still finishing in the points. Granted, his competition to get to the points wasn't really that crazy. He did
Well,
have to pass. He did have to pass Lewis in the Ferrari to get P9, but still, like that. That
that
was
didn't mean what
awesome.
we thought it would mean at the beginning of the week, though.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But still, like to reverse yourself out of the grass when you were otherwise stuck, and it looked like you were stuck.
Yeah, I still honestly don't know how he did that. Even watching his onboard, it looks like he's screwed. And then for a while, he's just not going anywhere, and then it
I,
just finally works.
I wonder if Zach Brown is gonna like slip Jeremy Clarkson like a couple hundo. So
Yeah,
apparently, a Piastri credited learning how to reverse a tractor as the reason he was able to get out of the grass.
yeah.
So
Which I thought was a pretty funny thing.
yeah, so that for me was a big hit. I would say Kimi finishing P4 was a big hit for me. That was exciting, especially because I had him finishing. I don't think I had him in the top 10 at least at the beginning of last week. Maybe P10. But for him to finish P4 was incredibly awesome. Um, yeah, that was by hits, Kimi and Piastri, and then Sainz helping Albon, which I don't think would make that much of a difference. Albon had pace, he had speed, he looked really, really good.
You
I
know why
think,
it did? I will refute you immediately with proof.
okay,
Yuki Tsunoda.
touche.
Yuki Tsunoda was in sixth place. His team made a bad strategy call, and he didn't finish in the points. They made the call Williams didn't make and ended up out of the points. Williams made the good call and ended up in fifth.
Well, Yuki finished P6.
Did he end up finishing P6?
Yeah.
Really?
I I have the app right here. Let me quadruple check. Oh
How
wait,
did I miss?
no. You're right. You're right. Yuki finished P12.
Yeah, I was like,
The other driver who I didn't expect to finish P6 finished P6, and it was Lance Stroll.
Yeah. That's why I was looking at you like that. I'm like, I swear I saw Stroll finish sixth.
Yeah, no, yeah, Stroll finished sixth, and I
Stroll
think
actually had an incredibly solid race, and my prediction of Lance Stroll not being garbage this year started off one for one. That's all I'm
yeah,
gonna say.
yeah, and I think that's why I thought Yuki finished P6 is like it's so hard for me to believe that Lance Stroll of all people finished that high in the top 10.
But when I say Lance Stroll in wet weather usually works unless it's Brazil.
So we've got maybe 3 races this year that he'll finish good.
I'm still on the Lance Stroll resurgence train because I love chaos. Apparently,
You just love to be devil's advocate. What were your misses?
everything. The existence of that race was my misses.
That's a cop out.
No, literally, I missed on pretty much everything except for
I think I
Lando and
interpreted
Max.
I think I interpreted the hits and misses a little bit differently.
Yeah,
Yeah, just a bit. Because my misses were, I thought it was like hits, like, oh, these things actually made an impact. And misses were like, oh, these were missed opportunities. Not, oh,
no.
well, my predictions were completely wrong. So my segment would have been nil
Yeah,
in that. But
all my predictions were wrong except for Lando and Max being 1-2 and George barely beating Kimmy.
yeah,
That's it. That's that's all I got right. I was wrong about everything else.
yeah.
All right, so and now we get this really quick turnaround to China.
Let's go.
Another track that some of these guys have never raced at before.
It'll
And
be interesting.
before we get fully into the predictions, I almost have a bonus one.
Okay.
I think this is where we find out about Liam Lawson a little bit. Here in Japan, now, while he doesn't have experience at China, China's a track that, based on other tracks he's really good at, he should be good at. It's a track that, while he doesn't necessarily have a specific driving style, he does really good in the fast, high speed corner type of tracks, which are the tracks that Red Bull tends to be good at, the tracks that Max tends to be good at. Those are the same ones that Lawson really likes. This is a track that should suit Liam Lawson. We're going to find out how bad that Red Bull is and where Liam Lawson is at, I think, this weekend. This weekend and then in Japan, because that's a track he knows really well.
I also think it's an opportunity to just really see what the pace of the Red Bull is with Lawson.
And what the pace of a lot of people are, because I feel like we didn't get a very good reference of where the field is at in Australia.
Yeah. And also, with Australia being a very wet race, Mercedes last season dominated in the wet races. So I'm curious to see how it transitions to a dry track. And if they do still have the same problems as last year, it was just covered because it was a wet race.
I still wonder about their tire degradation, but they definitely have pace that they didn't have last year, because that qualifying session, George was impressive.
Fair, yeah.
And that was a very hot qualifying session. Now, if the race was in that heat, do their tires keep as well? Don't know, but they looked good on one lap pace.
Yeah, yeah.
And their race pace did look pretty good in
Yeah.
practice. So let's start with our expected top three. We're just going to focus on the race top three, not the sprint race, though. Honestly, my race and sprint race top three would be the exact same three. So let's start with yours. What are your top three for China?
Well, to piggyback off the sprint, mine would be the same 3 people. The order might change, but that's honestly not worth discussing because it's going to be the same 3 people. So for me, starting from third, I have Max Verstappen. Um, I think he looked really good in the last race. I think I have some worries and some fears about the current Red Bull car. Um, for instance, he was 16 and a half seconds behind Lando while Max was in second place in Australia. And that's a bit worrying. That doesn't often happen. Um, Second place, I have Oscar. I think he's going to come back with vengeance. I think he was severely disappointed by the outcome of the Australian GP. I think he might have a chip on his shoulder, and he's gonna come back fierce. And I think Lando is going to continue the momentum that he has from winning the Australian GP and take China as well. I think this year McLaren really has it figured out. Maybe not so much the papaya rules thing, that's still up in the air for me. But in terms of their pace, how great their car looks, and just how competitive both cars are against each other, I think it's going to be a 1-2 McLaren with Lando in first and Oscar in second.
So we don't have much disagreement here, which shouldn't be a surprise. After testing in Australia, I'm just willing to concede McLaren is that much better than everybody else, at least until Spain, when the flexi wing is gone forever. But my top three: third, Verstappen. I kind of waffle on this a little bit, but I think second, Oscar, first, Lando.
I agree.
I could see a world where Oscar, either in the sprint or in the Grand Prix, beats out Lando, but I just have a feeling in the actual race it's going to be Lando.
Yeah, and I mean I've went back and forth on whether Oscar or Lando would actually which one would actually take P1 in that race. And at the end of the day, I think the reason I chose Lando in first is A, the momentum, but also B, to go back to the papaya rules thing. I think McLaren is all about saying, "Hey, yeah, papaya rules, you guys can fight it out," until it becomes too close, where something might happen, and then they chicken out and they screw Oscar over because Lando is the clear number one. And so,
Though with that new
that's
contract,
yeah. I mean, but still, I mean, at the end of the day, I think they'd still put Lando in first.
giving
He's
Oscar an equal contract to Lando was
kind of crazy, and an upgrade of like,
eye opening.
and the amount of money more he makes now too. I think he went from like 4 million or 6 million to 20 million
Yeah.
a year.
And I'm sure some of that had to do with the Red Bull sniffing around and Christian Horner openly flirting with how much he likes Oscar Piastri, and I'm sure that helped. But from what I've heard from some of the sources, especially ones around Weber, this deal was being made for a while, so this wasn't a knee jerk deal. They had been working on this for a while to get Oscar long term. He's delivered everything that you would want him to deliver, so it makes sense that if he wants to sign, to get him as
Yeah,
long as possible.
yeah, and I mean it doesn't make sense to shake up your driver lineup. You guys won, the constructors last season. They have they've had Lando and Oscar have had their tiff, every once in a while. I think that's more on the team's part than it is on Lando and Oscar.
Yeah.
Uh, I think their dynamic is just really well, and I think that was a really smart move by Zach and McLaren to lock both drivers in and keep that going into 2026. Because at that point, you don't have to worry about the driver dynamic. You don't have to worry about how they handle each other and their tempers. It's not like a Pierre and Ocon situation. It's now in 2026 and beyond, we just have to worry about the car.
Yeah. So I have a little bit of a punt for my driver of the day. I think it's going to be Isaac Hadjar.
Really?
So I was extremely critical when we were talking preseason about Isaac, I was not sure if he would have a seat for the whole year. He impressed. Take the formation lap crash out. His pace all weekend in the dry shocked me. Absolutely shocked me. He was on it so quickly. And like he's someone I've watched a lot. I tend to watch a lot of the Red Bull Junior guys, a decent amount. And I spend a lot of time watching F3 and F2. I love watching the feeder series. So I've watched a decent amount of Hadjar. I know he's fast, but he really impressed me with how he did in the dry at Melbourne. And I really think that's going to translate well to China. And I think he is going to have an incredible weekend. I think he's not just going to be in the points, but be towards the middle end of points in, like a seventh position, something like that, and fighting with Yuki. And I think that Racing Bulls car might actually be the surprise of the season.
Yeah, I mean, that is a bit of a punt. He looked really impressive in the practices, and I think the crash on the formation lap was purely just a rookie error.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could see just how distraught he was. It broke my heart. I'm not the biggest Isaac Hadjar fanboy or anything. I think he's a great driver. I don't really know all that much about him. But to just see how tore up he was about that was heartbreaking. The fact that Lewis's dad came over and said some things to him, and it looked like the FIA, one of the FIA people, was at Racing Bulls,
Yeah.
talking to him and stuff. Yeah, I can't say that I would put. I definitely didn't put him as my driver of the day. But I can't say I could personally see him being driver of the day, but I can see him having a really, really strong race in China. I think the only thing that puts me off, and it's not to Isaac, it's more towards my distaste towards Helmut Marko. Uh, I saw something, and I can't verify its validity. I can't even tell you
Oh, yeah. Yep.
what account posted it, but like we'll see how he goes in the next 3 to 5 races. I'm like, bro, you can't be talking about this like that. Like he's a rookie, pure rookie. It's not Daniel Ricciardo. It's not Yuki Tsunoda. He is. He literally just had his first race, and you're already saying, "Yeah, well, we'll see how it goes in the next 3 to 5." You know how much I hate Helmut Marko. I just
Big.
cannot stand him. I think he's a brilliant guy. He's great at what he does, except for when he talks. And that's what I cannot stand about him. I just can't. And so that put me off. Is like, oh wow, like Marco's already looking for the next escape route, which isn't good for any team, good for any
Well,
driver.
to a point, I think some of that stuff gets taken out of context a little bit because the actual conversation was more about his emotional reaction, which I also don't agree with some of the things that Helmut said. But it wasn't necessarily about, hey, we're going to replace him if he's not good in 3 or 5 races. It was more about Hadger's emotional stuff, which is a
Which is
problem they've had
also
with Yuki too.
which
And
is also bullshit. Like the dude's a rookie.
it's
It's
a
his
young
first
guy thing.
GP.
It's the same thing that people give a lot of young drivers crap for when they come in young, and it just some people wear their emotions on their sleeve, some don't.
Yeah. And I'm
That
with
is what
Isaac.
it
I wear
is.
my emotions on my sleeve.
Yeah. Who is your driver of the day for China?
This is going to come as no surprise, but it's going to be Lando again.
See, you're going with the safe one this time. Smart, smart.
I'm just going with what I genuinely think, and because we talked about this, I think it was last episode or maybe it was the episode before. Driver of the day is a fan voted thing, and Lando has a cult like following, just like Danny Rick did. Maybe not as much. And so, because it's a fan voted thing, and it's not like, oh, the FIA is awarding this necessarily, I think whoever wins is going to get driver of the day, unless it was like, uh, I can't even remember what race, but somebody got driver of the day. I think it was it Danny Rick last season? He got driver. No, he got fastest lap on his last race. Uh, there was a driver that got driver of the day because it was their home race or something.
Yeah, you'll have some random ones like that occasionally.
Yeah, and I just don't have I don't treat driver of the day as like a pure statistic. This was the best driver of the day thing, and that's why I pick Lando. Not only because he's going to win, and I love Lando, but because it is a very fan driven thing, and typically with Lando's fan base, if he's winning, he's going to get driver of the day.
Well, I agree and disagree. But you got to wait for why I disagree.
Wait till when?
Later. So, lock of the weekend, I'm not even going to spend any time on it. My lock of the weekend is McLaren dominates.
Yeah.
That is
same.
my lock.
Yeah,
McLaren
same.
1-2. That's my lock of the weekend.
Yeah, same.
All right, so you don't actually have to wait that long.
Okay.
My shock of the weekend is I have Hadger getting a top 5. And that's why I think he's going to be driver of the day.
Okay. Bold.
I still think Mercedes will have issues with their degradation. I think the Red Bull is a very bad car.
Racing Bulls.
No. I think the Red Bull is a very bad car.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I have legitimate questions if that car is actually a midfield car being propped up by an incredible driver. No. I seriously wonder if you put Max in a Mercedes and an Alpine in a Ferrari, if he would still be getting the performances that he is out of the Red Bull. Because I'm not convinced that car isn't the 4th or 5th fastest car in the grid right now, and it just doesn't look like that because Max is doing Max things with it.
Right. And with Lawson crashing out, we really don't know where he sits in that car.
And honestly, Lawson was slow all weekend. And I'm starting to think it's not the other drivers. Because I know how good Liam Lawson is. And a lot of times a guy goes beside Max and it's like, all right, well, he was fast in this, but is he going to be fast? Liam Lawson is fast in everything that he has ever driven. Ever. There hasn't been a series Liam Lawson has went into where he isn't one of the fastest people, if not the fastest person. Immediately. One of his best strengths is how adaptable he is and how quick he gets on the pace. He won his first DTM race in a GT3 car, having never raced a GT3 car. He won his first Super Formula race, having barely even tested a Super Formula car before that. He has won on debut in nearly everything until he got to F1, which, I mean, his first debut in F1 was in an RB with an engine penalty and a downpour in the Netherlands. And that's another thing. His first F1 race ever was on one day's notice in a downpour at one of the hardest tracks to race in the rain.
That is true. Yeah.
And he beat Yuki that day. Despite starting from the back with an engine penalty that wasn't even his engine penalty. This isn't a guy who is horribly off the pace and wrecks easy.
Yeah.
So if he is horribly off the pace and can't control a car, in a team that has had problems with the second driver being horribly off the pace and unable to control the car, it's the car. And
which is the same problem that they have neglected to actually handle for the last couple seasons with Checo.
And I think this is the only thing that makes it hard about Max being on your team is he can make anything fast. So it's hard to notice where you went wrong because he's so quick. And he can negate a lot of issues your car has. But there is obviously something about that Red Bull that is very hard to drive. And because of that, I don't think Lawson ends up in the top 5. I think Ferrari are slower than we thought they were going to be. I don't think they end up in the top 5. And I think Mercedes' tire issues on the long runs are better, but I still think China is a place where if any of that characteristic still exists, it'll be exposed there because of these fast, high-load corners and sharp braking zones. They tear apart tires, and if they have any of those issues, they're still going to be there. So I'm taking a little bit of a punt. I think Hadger is fast. It's not going to be a wet weekend. I think he sneaks the top 5 in somehow.
Okay. So just as a little warning, I have a wild card for you after this, where you're going to have to talk about Yuki and Lawson. So yeah, I'll just put that out there. Keep that same fire that you got going on.
So what's your shock of the weekend?
Oh, mine could be a little controversial depending on what fan base you fall into if you're listening to this. I have both Mercedes finishing ahead of both Ferraris.
Does that qualify as a shock?
Given...
Because they just did it.
Yes.
Handedly.
Yes, but in wet conditions. And we know...
But this is where I'll argue with you. George did it in qualifying in dry.
Yeah, but that was George, who's an experienced driver.
Kimmy's first ever qualifying, and he still got 12th or 11th.
Yeah, but still in the dry. And I think that is where the shock is it's Kimmy's second GP. It'll be the first dry GP. Tire management's going to be huge. We know in past Mercedes has struggled in dry condition with tire management. And that's kind of where this comes from. Yeah, both Mercedes just finished ahead of both Ferraris in Australia, but it was in wet conditions. Mercedes has dominated, per se, in wet conditions in the past. I think they might have their tire management under lock and both Mercedes finish ahead of both Ferraris, which would be a huge upset if you're a Ferrari fan, especially with Lewis.
I think this year is going to be a huge upset as a Ferrari fan.
Oh, for sure. And like, I think Kimi deserves a little bit more than a golf clap for coming in his first GP and beating Lewis by 6 positions.
Kimi was incredible.
Yeah.
There's no other way around it. Kimi had an amazing race. Though, real quick, and I hate to keep going back to Australia, but we're not giving someone their flowers who deserves it.
Who is that?
Nico Hulkenberg. Because Nico Hulkenberg drove that crap box into seventh.
That is true.
Which, considering they had 1 points finish all of last year, race one in horrid conditions, dragging that terrible car, that kick Sauber, please kick it out of the way car, up to P7. He deserves some serious credit for that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. 100%.
Because that is a bad car. It was horribly slow in practice and qualifying, and he managed to survive and get it into a good position, which could be their only points finish of the year. And so I want to put a little respect on Nico's name.
He deserves it.
How well
he
he
deserves
did.
it. I will say on the whole Kick Sauber car, my little brother was watching the race with me a little bit on and off, and he was watching the last bit, and he's like, honestly, I hate that Kick Sauber car. Not because it's terrible, because I told him how terrible the car was. He's like, because they're sponsored by Kick. I just thought that was the funniest thing. And then I was like, also steak. And he just went sour in the face. I was just like, but next year they're Audi. So it's okay. As long as they don't retain title sponsorships.
Ugliest car on the grid, too.
For sure.
That car is so ugly. And I'm someone who loves green. And it's just.
Same.
Ugh.
I will say, I've went on record on the podcast saying that I'm going to be a big Audi fanboy. The one thing that will make me not be an Audi fanboy is if they retain the kick stake title sponsorships for Audi.
I don't think that will happen.
I don't either. I don't either. But if they do, I will not support it.
I have a feeling, just because of the Andretti organization's association with Cambridge, I have a feeling that's going to be the title sponsor coming over. They've been big sponsors of them in IndyCar, and I think Cambridge will come over to F1 and probably be the big Cadillac sponsor.
Yeah, but I'm talking about Audi.
Oh, shit. What am I? See, this is what happens when I don't sleep. Son of a bitch. Yeah, that's.
I was gonna cut you off, but I was like, I'll let him finish. Yeah, no, like, because it's Kick Stake Sauber Formula One team.
Yeah.
And that becomes Audi next season, and if it becomes Kick Stake Audi Formula One team, I will not support it, not one bit. I cannot stand not just the colors. It's not the colors. It's not the way the car looks. It's none of that. Kick is a terrible platform. Stake is a terrible platform. The fact that they already have title sponsors in Formula One, this is my soapbox. The fact that they have title sponsorship in Formula One is atrocious. And if Audi, which I don't think they will, because Audi is a really prestigious brand, but if they do take those title sponsorships into 2026, I will no longer be an Audi fanboy.
I feel like Audi doesn't need it, and I feel like Audi will probably stay. Audi has touted too much about how German they're going to be, and I have a feeling they'll try to find a title sponsor closer to home.
I hope so, but I hope it's better than those two.
That remains to be seen, but.
Also, I just would love to go back to when it wasn't title sponsor central for all the teams. Because now the team names are like super long and super annoying.
You'd have to go back a long time for that. That's like the great history of Formula One.
At least with like Williams is one of the better ones. It's just Elias and Williams Formula One team.
But I mean, Williams has been one of those ones that went through a whole bunch of names too.
That's fair. All right. So, with that Lawson fire that you just had, I want your thoughts on this statement. We were fast today, which is really nice. I was much faster than some other people today. I mean, Liam, for example, was, maybe I don't say too much.
That's exactly why he doesn't have a Red Bull seat, because he doesn't know the opportune times to shut his mouth.
And I will say for the audience that might not be super in the loop, that was a statement made in a press conference by Yuki Tsunoda after qualifying.
So let's have a little bit of story time here, because I know a lot of things about Red Bull, and I know some of the things about how they operate and why certain things have happened. Um, and a lot of that is because of how much I stalk and love their now former head mechanic, Callum Nicholas. And he had alluded to something a while back that I ended up digging into and finding out the bigger story of. And you'll understand what it has to do with Yuki. And it's Pierre Gasly. There's a very simple reason why Pierre Gasly was never given a second shot at Red Bull. And it's because Pierre Gasly didn't know how to shut up. And there was a specific incident when he was struggling where he got into a little bit of a tiff with Adrian Newey in front of the team. And it wasn't very long after that Alex Albon was the driver. And even with how good his performances were, there was a reason why he was never given another shot with Red Bull, and that they would rather lose him to another team than promote him. There are certain things. Red Bull is a very free to be yourself, free to be personality kind of team. But there's a few things that they don't like.
For instance, they let Max be as honest as he wants to be.
Yes. And Checo never really got in trouble for speaking his mind about things. Even when it was negative things and even when he disagreed with things.
But it wasn't trashing another driver.
You don't call out certain people. You don't call out members of the team. And you don't trash other drivers. And
especially
Yuki doing that.
Especially a driver that we all know Yuki has feelings with because he got the Red Bull seat that Yuki wanted.
Yeah.
And it was rather deliberate because I quote, "I was much faster than some other people today, comma, I mean Liam, for example." That was very deliberate. That wasn't a slip of the tongue. He could have just left it, "I was faster than some other people today," and it would have been kosher.
Yeah, it would have been a little sly thing, but and this is the thing that I talk about with Yuki. Yuki is not mature enough or mentally strong enough to be Max Verstappen's teammate. That's the reason he doesn't have the job. And
outside
Red
of the
Bull
Honda thing.
It has nothing to do with the Honda thing. And Red Bull has even said it. Nobody will listen to them. Red Bull has repeatedly said it's not about performance. It's not. Yuki Tsunoda, they do not believe he has the mental strength to handle the pressure that comes with being a Red Bull driver beside Max Verstappen.
I also think it's a professionalism thing, because that's not a very professional statement to make.
But it's also statements, when you make statements like that, it's a mental strength thing.
And it shows just how much of a chip that Yuki has on his shoulder.
Yeah. And the fact is, and I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant about Yuki because everybody loves Yuki, but Yuki dug his own grave in F1. And don't get me wrong, nice guy, but he did this to himself, and everyone keeps blaming Red Bull for what Yuki did to himself. The fact is, Yuki started his career having the habits that everyone accuses Lance Stroll of. He was lazy, he was out of shape, and he had to be threatened into working out. They
which we've
had to
said
make
before.
Yuki Tsunoda move to Italy to get him to work out. They had to force him to move there just to get him to go through the other things that other Red Bull guys do. You know who they didn't have to do that to? Liam Lawson. Because Liam Lawson was there at the Red Bull facilities working with the Red Bull trainers and the Red Bull doctors and the Red Bull team and the Red Bull simulators every day, whether he was supposed to be, whether he came in on his own. That's how you get ingrained in these teams. Yes, the results are important, but the behind the scenes work is more important when you're trying to get that top seat. They need to know that you have the mental ability to be in a top team. So many times in F1 and even in other racing series, you see guys go from lower teams to top teams and they drown. And it's because of things like these. It's
Yeah.
because of that work ethic. It's because of that mental strength. The reason why Max Verstappen is the best driver in the world isn't because Max Verstappen was born the best driver in the world. It's
No, he worked
because
his
he
ass off for it.
outworks everyone.
And
Max's vacations are sim racing.
yeah. Well, not even vacations. The dude's been known to do 24-hour races in the middle of a Formula One race weekend.
Yeah. All he does is racing, and he if you notice, the Lewis Hamilton's another great example of that. The guys who are successful in racing are the guys who work the hardest at racing. And Yuki Tsunoda has never been known as a guy who works hard.
Facts. Very true.
And as much as that's going to upset some people and people want to turn it into one thing or another, the fact is, no matter what he improves from now on, Yuki in that organization has a reputation as a lazy, emotional guy. And going into your first media sessions of the week after practice or after qualifying, and one of your first statements is, "Hey, look, I beat this guy. I'm faster than this guy." You're proving everything Red Bull thought about why you don't need to be in that seat.
Yeah.
Because then are you going to start trying to rile up the other side of the garage because you're emotional? Then you're gone.
Yeah.
Can you be a number 2 to Max Verstappen? If the answer is no, then you're not getting that seat. They know what they have with Liam. A guy who's going to work his butt off, and a guy who is fine with being a number 2 for Max Verstappen till at least 2026.
Yeah, I was literally going to say that Lawson's fine with being a number 2 because he's working to become a number 1 once Max leaves.
Or even when after the rookie season, he is accepting, like, this is Max Verstappen. I'm not going to beat him right now.
Yeah.
I'm on my own thing trying to figure out how to be good at this.
I'm glad you had a rant on that. And before we get off, I will give my thoughts on this, which is very similar to yours. Actually, I really don't have to say much because it would just be repeating what you just said. But he just numbered his days. We know how quickly the Red Bull organization can turn on a driver. We know how little care they put into how much it hurts that driver to replace them mid-season. Honestly, the fact that Checo made it as long as he did was quite surprising, given their track record in cutting drivers. Yuki just numbered his days with that statement because they'll be more likely to keep Isaac than they will be to keep Yuki through the whole season if he keeps making remarks like that. And I will say, something seems weird because all of the original posts that I could find about this statement were deleted, and this was just like the subsequent threads on Threads, the app. So part of me feels like Red Bull pushed to have, like Red Bull PR pushed to have those deleted by all these outlets or something. I don't know. I can't verify if that's true. It's just my theory. But he did number his days with this statement, especially in the first race of the season.
I agree. And whether it's Arvid Lindblad coming in mid-season or them making some other move, though I think, honestly, if they make a move, that's going to be who it is. I think Yuki is now in a situation where now he has to start watching his back, because if in a few races Lindblad starts looking good in F2, Yuki may not even get to see the rest of this year. Because
Yeah.
you also have to look at it from this perspective when you're looking at Racing Bulls. Do you want to you're coming into this rule change the way that a lot of teams wanted to get their driver lines in order for this year to iron out all the things before the rule change. If they decide that they don't want Yuki, are they really going to let him stay till the end of the year?
No.
Or are they going to
Absolutely
want to go into next year knowing that they don't have a rookie coming in, and they want to get that rookie a little bit of seat time before he goes in?
Exactly. And to add more validity to it, Honda's partnership ends at the end of the season with Red Bull.
Well, and
I mean,
Honda's already severed their ties in a way with Yuki. They are now only a sponsor of Yuki. He is no longer a part of their program.
Oh, okay, that's news to me.
Yeah,
That changes it. That changes what I was going to say.
They're doing it to try to help him get a seat next year, but he's not helping himself.
No.
Because
and honestly,
if you're another team principal seeing those comments, do you want that?
I mean, potentially, I could think of at least one team principal off the top of my head that
You want those
might
questions, and you don't want those things said in press conference. Those are things you bring up when if Yuki sees Christian in the paddock and he's like, hey, look where I was. Look where he is. That's one thing. But to go into the media pen and say it.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
There are times to speak your mind, and there's times to shut up. And those times are different when you don't have a world champion badge.
That's
Lewis can speak his mind. Max can speak his mind. Alonso can speak his mind. They've won titles. Yuki doesn't have an F2 title.
They also have a significant amount of tenure on top of Yuki.
No. But
they've been in the sport,
until you've lifted a trophy, nobody cares.
Yeah. Even a Grand Prix trophy, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. Leclerc has trophies.
Norris has trophies.
Norris has trophies. His team will listen to him.
Oscar has trophies, which is...
Yeah. Yuki doesn't have a race win.
No.
Yuki doesn't... There's times when you need to know when to shut up to not hurt your career. And this was one of those times.
Yeah.
And as soon as I saw the quote, as soon as I saw the interview, I mentioned it to you. Like, I think he just confirmed that he'll never get a shot.
And I saw it a couple hours after the fact, and then I had to go deep diving for hours to find it. And scroll through countless threads to find it.
Luckily, me being up at crazy hours at night, I get to see the stuff when it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, because I couldn't find the video of it. I couldn't find any of it. I literally just found this thread that quoted it, and I took a screenshot of it and sent it to you, and it's like, is this the one you were talking about?
Yep. So I have this really cool app on my phone called Seed Stream. And you can basically set it up to have it's almost like you're like a social media stream of articles and things like that for F1.
Okay.
That's what I have it set up for. So like I get all my news going into my Seed Stream app. And it does a good job of a lot of the things are stuff from the race and people like that who aren't the clickbait people. So usually when I see something in Seed Stream, I know that like, oh, okay, this is a real thing that actually happened and not, something from GP News 35. Yep.
Downloading it right now.
Yeah, it's it's my go-to for finding F1 news because it's easier than scrolling like social media platforms for updates, with
Yeah.
keywords and things like that. Like it's just articles, videos, things like that from the good sources for the most part.
This is going to be life changing because I'm so tired of like having keyword searches saved on Threads or Reddit or something like that to just find out things and then having to deal with the cesspool of other things.
Yeah, exactly. It makes it so much more convenient. Like I'm over here, free advertisement. Seed Stream sponsor us.
Future sponsor
So,
ad.
so last thing, and I'll let you go first because I have a little bit of a special answer for mine. What are
Okay.
you looking forward to most this weekend?
Honestly, just to see the true pace in an actual race of all of the drivers. I think that will give me kind of the missing information that I need. We've seen testing, we've seen practice, we've seen qualifying, we've seen a race already. All of those conditions were vastly different. All of the paces were different in some cases. I really want to see a race where I can identify the paces of all of the cars. And I really look forward to China being that. It doesn't look like it's going to be a wet race this time of year. China is pretty average in temperature. It's not going to be overly hot, not going to be overly cold. I think this is a really good race to really see where all of the drivers are at, as long as they don't, crash out within the first 5 laps.
Yeah, I can agree with that. China's a track that I feel will give us our first real assessment of everyone who's not McLaren.
Yes, yeah, because we know McLaren's fast,
Yeah.
and I'm happy about it.
there,
I'm so happy
there,
about it.
there's no dispute about that for now. McLaren is definitely fast. The Red Bull fan of me is hoping this is kind of the opposite of last year, where Max got out to a quick start and McLaren came back. I'm hoping that McLaren gets out to that start, and then once we get to the technical directive in Spain, Red Bull comes back and makes it more of a competition. But I think everybody with eyes can agree that the one thing we know for sure is McLaren is faster than everybody else. All
Yeah,
the other things are still up for question.
yeah, and the Red Bull car for sure is up for question, but I don't know if the technical direction or whatever that the FIA drops for the micro DRS is gonna make a massive difference for Red Bull.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't.
know. I don't know. I don't want to say it won't, and I don't want to say it will.
It could be a
I,
tiny thing. It could be a major thing. It's really hard to tell. It could
yeah,
just be makes the cars harder to balance thing.
and I think this coming weekend will give us a good idea of whether or not it will make a small or big difference if it's a dry race.
And I also think we'll get the true pace of the rookies
Yeah,
and
100%.
a dry session and a track that's an actual track and not a street track. So it will have normal grip levels and it is a more representative thing for the rest of the year.
I don't want to drag this out, so I kind of want a shorter answer. And it's just off a cuff question. How many races until we see Kimmy on the podium?
I hope for.
I was
I
gonna
don't
say
want him to
6.
break. I don't want him to break Max's record. I need 2 more races of him not on the podium.
That's fair. That's fair. I will say that's fair.
Purely from a selfish thing of youngest person on the podium. Well, actually, I don't think Max is the youngest on the podium anymore. I just think he's the youngest winner. I think Lando's youngest on the podium now.
So if
I
we
think I
we
don't.
can we'll revisit this next week.
Yeah,
we'll do some research. I give it 6. I give it 6 races. Within the
I,
next six, or within 6 races of the season, so we have 5 left to go in that, we'll see Kimi on the podium.
it could have been Sunday, honestly. If Max wasn't amazing at somehow not. At some point, you have to go and watch Max's 2 laps on the slick tires in the rain,
I
and
was
tell
keeping an eye
me,
on him.
just go and watch the pure onboard of those laps from when Lando and Oscar go off in pit and the rain starts coming down. The 2 laps Max did before he pit,
It was
and
snap heaven.
how he managed in the wet sections to carry the speed he did without wrecking, I'll never know. But it really was incredible to watch. But yeah, with Kimi, it could be China. Honestly, he's fast. He has proven to me that he's fast. If he gets his qualifying in order, it could be any race that he gets on the podium.
I like that answer. I'm glad
race,
Kimi has changed your mind.
I'm a very simple person to change my mind. Show me you're as good as you say you are.
That's fair.
If you show it on track, I believe it. I'm very much that person. I don't show me your speed, and I'll believe your speed. I don't believe in potential. I believe in what actually shows up on the track.
Yeah.
Which is why I also gave Hadger his flowers for his performance in practice and qualifying, because he showed he had speed that I wasn't sure he had in F1. And Kimi has done the same thing. And I was incredibly impressed with him.
Yeah.
And speaking of speed, what I'm looking forward to this weekend, surprisingly, has nothing to do with F1.
What is it?
So in the gap between F1 sessions, I will be taking part in the 12 hours of Sebring with my sim racing team, Square Motosports. We'll be starting Saturday at 1600 GMT, which is 2 o'clock here in the States, 2 p.m. I'll be streaming it on
1600 is 4 o'clock p.m. for those who don't know Greenwich Mean Time.
Usually the people who actually know what that means know what 600
I run my entire life in 24-hour time, so.
Yeah, same. So, I'll be streaming on my Twitch, the Mayor of Akron at Twitch. We'll be streaming the whole race.
We'll drop links.
Yeah. Links will be in the descriptions and all of that. Really excited. We did the 24 hours of Daytona and got a top 5 out of it. Really excited for Sebring. Our team's been on the ball to start the year. We've got some really great drivers across all of our assorted teams, doing all the different time slots. Really excited for it. Sim racing is a deep passion of mine. And so I'm kind of glad that we're in this weird stretch of the season where we're in kind of weird hours, because it works perfect. The race literally ends an hour before the F1 race starts.
That is perfect timing.
It is perfect timing. I will be watching the F1 race on practically no sleep, if not completely no sleep. But yeah, it's going to be an awesome weekend of motorsports for me, both what I'm competing in and then what we get to watch in China with our back-to-back F1 weekends.
And your team is actually a sponsor of our podcast, so it's an extra special moment for us.
Yes. And just exciting times all around. I feel like this sim racing community is awesome. It's something I love being a part of, and it's a great way to help grow motorsports. And examples of Max now running a real life GT3 team in the GT World Challenge Europe, which one of the drivers comes from his Redline Sim team, who is only doing his second year ever racing cars in real life, and will now get to do, the 24 hours of Spa among other races, which is
It's
incredible.
crazy.
And I'm so excited to see sim racing going to the places that it is, and I can't wait to see how much further it goes. And I'm still searching for my first win in endurance series, so really
Let's get
hoping that
it.
it comes this weekend at Sebring, where we're going to be taking our Square Motosports Mustang and trying to bring some America to this place.
I love that, and I really do hope. I hope you get your first podium. I do.
Definitely been working my butt off. That's why I look so tired. All my non-work moments have been spent in my sim rig that's literally right beside me over here, just pounding away laps, and really excited to see what happens this weekend on many fronts, and just really grateful for how awesome both the in real life and sim racing communities have exploded, and we get to enjoy motorsports in so many different forms. And that's the thing that I take away from this weekend. My kind of closing thoughts of, I got to spend my weekend watching several different series of cars and bikes race, and with the in real life 12 hours of Sebring happening, MotoGP racing, the F1 race, and
NASCAR.
an actually decently thrilling NASCAR race at Vegas that I really enjoyed. I get to spend my entire weekend when I wasn't at work, and even some while I was at work, watching a bunch of awesome different motorsports, and it's just a really, really good time to be a fan of cars that go fast.
It's a really good time of year too. Like I love it. I love it when racing series overlap and you have more than one option. It's like when football and baseball for most people overlap.
Yeah,
Or not football and
uh,
baseball, basketball and baseball.
I know what you meant.
Yeah. I had to clarify
It,
to not sound like a stupid idiot on the
it,
podcast.
and I especially love the beginning of the year because it's everything starts with hope. It starts with something new, and just every series you're going through the same thing of like finding out, like, all right, what's this year going to be? Everyone starts off excited and hopeful, and you get to kind of see what the year is going to be like. And both in real life and in sim racing, it's been a lot of that. And I'm really excited with how my year personally has started off with a lot of that. And I look forward to it continuing.
Likewise. Likewise.
Well, that's a perfect point for us to end here. I want to thank everyone who's tuning in, and those of you watching on YouTube as well. These episodes will now all be on YouTube as well. We finally started out with last week, so you can get us on literally every podcasting service you can imagine. And now the video for this will be available on YouTube. And we'll make sure to link the Twitch channel in the descriptions for those of you who want to follow along with the 12 hours of Sebring.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you guys have any feedback or anything like that, we'll put our website in the description, all of our socials, YouTube, everything. Feel free to drop a comment, send us a message, even our email I'll drop too. So that way, if you have feedback, things that you want to hear more of or something like that, just let us know.
I'm sure I'm going to get 12 emails to join the Yuki Tsunoda fan club after this.
I don't think they want you after the way you talked about him.
Yeah, I can almost guarantee that too. Again, thanks everyone for tuning in. We will be back again next Wednesday as we talk about what happened in China and have some recaps on kind of our entire week of racing. Thank you so much for tuning in.